Hello, everyone, and good day to every one of you. Today, we are going to continue with the next topic, void and lawful agreement. Okay. So, today we are going to learn about mistake under the section 21 of the Contract Act. And according to section 21, when both parties to an agreement are under a mistake of fact, and the mistake relates to a matter essential to the agreement is void. This means both parties are mistaken. The mistake involves an important fact, and because of that mistake, no valid contract exists. A mistake of fact refers to an error about something that exists or does not exist. It's not about the law. Okay? So the key point for you to remember here is that the mistake must be made by both parties. The mistake must be about an essential fact. If these conditions are met, the agreement is void. Okay? So let's take an example between Ali and Ahmad. Okay? So Ali agrees to buy a horse from Ahmad. At the time of agreement, both Ali and Ahmad believe that the horse is still alive. Later, they discovered that the horse had already died before the contract was made. So, this is a mistake of fact. The mistake is made by both parties. The horse is essential to the contract. Therefore, the agreement is void under section 21. So, section 21 protects parties when an agreement is formed based on a shared mistake of essential fact. If both parties are mistaken, the law treats the agreement as invalid from the beginning. Okay? So, let's discuss the elements of mistake under the contract law. For a mistake to make an agreement void, there are two main elements that must present. Number one, mistake made by both parties, or we call it as mutual mistake. The mistake must be made by both parties, not just one, and this is known as a mutual mistake. If only one party is mistaken, this section does not apply. The second element is mistake relating to a matter of fact essential to the agreement. The mistake must relate to a fact, not the law. The fact must also be essential, meaning it is a key part of the agreement. If the fact is not important to the contract, the agreement will still remain valid. Okay, so simple example for you again between Ali and Ahmad. Ali agrees to buy a car from Ahmad. At the time of the agreement, both Ali and Ahmad believe that the car exists. In fact, the car was already destroyed in an accident before the contract. So here, both parties made a mutual mistake. The existence of the car is an essential fact. Therefore, the agreement is void due to mistake. So remember, for a mistake to make an agreement void, the mistake must be made by both parties and it must relate to an essential matter of fact. If these elements are present, no valid contract exists. Next, mistakes of fact essentials to the agreement, focusing on the existence of the subject matters. Now, a mistake of fact essential to the agreement occurs when both parties believe that the subject matters of the contract exist. But in reality, it does not exist at the time the contract was made. Because the subject matter is essential, the agreement cannot operate. So under section 21, when both parties are under mistake, the agreement is void. Okay, so if we look at the illustration, okay, illustration under section 21, A agrees to buy a certain horse from B. At the time of the agreement, both A and B believe that the horse is alive. However, the horse was already dead. So neither party knew about this fact. So this is a mutual mistake. The existence of the horse is essential to the agreement. Therefore, the agreement is void. So simple explanation for you to understand. You cannot buy or sell something that does not exist. Since both parties were mistaken about an essential fact, the law treats the agreement as invalid from the beginning. So, a mistake as to the existence of the subject matter made by both parties will make the agreement void under section 21. So, if we look at the case here, okay, this case is about cargo of cotton. Okay, it's a contract for the sale of a cargo of cotton. A case between Raffles versus Winchell House. Okay, so the cotton was to arrive in London on a ship called the Peerless, sailing from Bombay. However, there were two ships named the Peerless. So both ships sailed from Bombay, but at different times. One party meant the earlier ship, while the other meant later ship. So the court decision says that there was a mutual mistake. The parties were not referring to the same ship. Therefore, there was no consensus at idem, means no meeting of minds. Okay, so the contract was void. Okay, this is a case on Raffles versus Winchell House. Okay, so simple explanation for you based on this decided case. Both parties thought that they agreed on the same ship, but each had a different ship in mind. Since the identity of the subject matter was different, so the agreement could not stand. Okay. So let's continue to the next one. Mistake as to the possibility of performing the contract. Okay, so this type of mistake happens when both parties believes that the contract can be performed, but in reality, performance is impossible from the beginning. If the contract cannot be performed as agreed, and both parties are mistaken about this essential fact, the agreement is void. So an example given here, decided case, Scheck Brothers versus Ochner. In Scheck Brothers versus Ochner, the appellant gave the respondent a license to cut and manufacture sisal from 5,000 acres of land in Kenya and deliver 50 tons of sisal fiber per month. At the time of the agreement, both parties believed that this amount could be produced. However, later it was discovered that the sisal plant could not produce 50 tons per month. The nature capacity of the land was insufficient. So the court held that performance of the contract was impossible. Both parties were mistaken about an essential fact. Therefore, the agreement was void. So the both parties thought that the land could produce enough sisal, but in reality, it was never possible. Since the contract could not be performed at all, so the law treated the agreement as invalid. Okay. Next, we will discuss on the effect of mutual mistake in contract law. Now, a mutual mistake occurs when both parties are mistaken about an essential matter of fact. So, effect under Section 21 of the Contract Act, when there is a mutual mistake, the agreement is void. This means the agreement has no legal effect and it is treated as if it is never existed. The effect under Section 66, when an agreement discovered to be void, if any party has received an advantage under the agreement, that party must restore it to the other party or pay compensation if restoration is not possible. The purpose is to ensure fairness and prevent unjust enrichment. Okay, so a mutual mistake makes an agreement void. Remember that. And any benefit received must be returned or compensated. This restores both parties to their original position. Next is on the unilateral mistake. We are going to refer to Section 23 of the Contract Act. Now, a unilateral mistake happens when only one party to the contract is mistaken, while the other party is not. Under Section 23, a contract affected by a unilateral mistake is not void. This means the contract remains valid and enforceable. The law takes the position because a person is expected to take reasonable care to understand what they are agreeing to before entering into a contract. In simple words, one party's carelessness is not enough to cancel a contract. So a key point for you to remember that only one party is mistaken. The other party is not mistaken. So the contract is valid, not void. Parties must make or take reasonable care. Okay, so a unilateral mistake does not void a contract. The law expects parties to check and understand their agreement. Carelessness by one party does not cancel the contract. Okay. Thank you very much. That's the end of this topic. I will see you again on our next topic. Thank you very much.